Hey, how's it going, everybody? As you can tell by the title, we are going to be covering the EU trade window for the spring split. All the rosters from 1 to 16 in the overall rankings. We're going to detail who the heck is changing, why they're changing, how I think it's going to go, and a whole bunch more. So with that said, let's jump straight into it because there's a bunch for us to cover. At number 1 is going to be Team BDS. Overall, number 1 in the rankings, one of the most consistent teams. And for some reason, after a bad performance, which is still at the major in international competition, it seems like Team BDS and the communication issues need to change something. If you haven't seen the news, what they have done is their longstanding vet in Mark by 8, who has been prolific for a while, is now on the bench, possibly due to what may be buyout issues and everything else, because it sounds like BDS is asking quite a bit for Mark by 8, rightfully so. Is now being replaced by Seiko, former of Endpoint. And this one, and you've heard conversations about it in my previous videos this week, was probably due to one of two reasons. Number one, full French roster. The ability to speak in the native tongue, I think, is valued extremely heavily. It's not something that we really have to worry about over in North America, and is an advantage that I think they do have. But over in Europe, with so many different cultures and everything, the French players wanting to speak French together, I think, is a pretty big deal. You also have Seiko, who many consider a top 10 player in Europe, being paired with the most consistent player with the highest skill floor in Monkey Moon, and we still haven't brought up Extra. This team in particular, I don't think Mark by 8 is bad by any means. I think it's just going to be different and honestly make BDS potentially even more threatening on offense, which I didn't know could be a thing. What it's going to look like, I don't particularly know, because the one thing I know about BDS that I fell in love with BDS was it felt like there was an unspoken chemistry on when and when not to go, when to cut rotation, all that kind of stuff. This is going to be different. Is Seiko better than Mark by 8? Arguably, yes. I do think so. Will it provide the same dynamic of what was with BDS? Kind of reminds me of the whole Sipical situation. Seiko's available. Do you let a player like Sipical not get picked up? That is kind of the conversation, and I think BDS enticed pretty well. Overall, the grade, kind of tough to give because I want to grade it based upon individual player, which I think is an improvement. But for results, you're talking about a team that has been dominant in the region for well over a year. All of last year as well. It's tough to say. Potential, I think long-term, this could be a B+ or even an AA-. What it's going to look like long-term, I'm excited to find out. Probably most people are going to be excited to find out about this one. But if I had to grade it just overall, I would probably say B+, A- at best, just because I do have a bit of reservation. But skill ceiling potential is very, very high. We then go to the number 2 team in Dignitas, who's staying the exact same. The only difference that they are looking for with Scrub, Jorias, and Jack is they are now searching for a coach. Initial conversation around Dignitas was, hey, we want to figure out what we are going to play like, how we want to attack and approach the game, and building that chemistry and organic playstyle together. Now that we've done that and we've had some struggles at the World Championships, we do have a mental coach, but we need an on-the-field coach to help us. That is what they're looking for. So Dignitas at number 2 overall, staying the same, but trying to bring in a new coach. Number 3, Team Queso. A lot of rumors where Vatira might possibly be going to BDS. Does get met with a "I'm not leaving" Wolf of Wall Street video. So the team that took 2nd place overall at the Winter Split Major, losing only to G2 and making the crazy lower bracket run, staying the exact same. Can they recreate nothing but 2nd place at worst? You're talking 2 first place, 2 second place, and that includes the major. Hard to repeat that occurrence. Can they do it with all these roster changes? I'm excited to find out in the spring split. Number 4, Endpoint. We just talked about how Endpoint lost their star player in Seiko, but they're replacing it with another talented player that somewhat plays a similar position in Archie. Archie of Semper will be making the transition over to Endpoint, but not as an official player. Archie is what they refer to as on loan, where while he is still under the flag of Semper, Endpoint is going to be basically paying Semper probably a healthy amount of money to borrow him, or to put him on loan, as it's been referred to, for the remainder of the season. So Archie, to my knowledge, is still officially under contract, and they haven't allowed to buy out, but they do and are aware that at the end of the year, there's probably going to be some conversations of buyouts and everything else. And this way, Endpoint is happy with what they have and are paying a bunch of money. And at the end of the season, Semper potentially gets to decide how they want to approach the scenario. If they want to let Archie go and do his thing, if a buyout needs to happen, or if they want to entice Archie to stay with a potential, hey, we'll let you rebuild the team, or whatever that roster may be. Right now, Endpoint picking Archie. If I had to grade this one in particular, I do think it's a downgrade. I think Seiko is a very special player that fit the team very, very well. Maybe communication wise and everything else, Archie will fit the team. I think Endpoint's got a really good staffing and infrastructure to make them feel welcome. You've got some veteran talent and some underappreciated talent and relating wave. I do think it's a little bit of a downgrade, maybe like a C minus overall. And as for results, Endpoints, that's gonna be tough, man. Back-to-back major appearances, and you're now doing it with a new player. I think they have potential to stay in that conversation for competitive 4-5, but I think this one's gonna be pretty tough for Endpoint. Seiko is a pretty special player, so curious to see how this one's gonna play out. But Archie as well, we've seen and raved about Archie in the past. Maybe we get to see that again, or maybe even better, you see the other players get propelled to new heights. Endpoint's an interesting one this split. I'm excited to watch them. Number 5, Evil Geniuses, staying the exact same. Expectations for them, even with the same roster, back to the major. After barely missing out in fall and then making it into winter, super consistent team. I was waiting to see that consistency after their original offseason results. They have shown it. Huge fan of Rizex and the boys as they continue to prove people wrong. That consistency is something that is extremely appreciated. Consistency is key, and Evil Geniuses has been doing exactly that. And number 6, going right down the line, we're going to SMPR. Now that Archie is no longer with, it is Shazette, Casio, and Exotic, former of a team name that I can't pronounce. It's probably displayed somewhere on your screen. I'm a little bit worried about this one. I think the replacement of Archie is a tough one, and SMPR for me is kind of their way, and are going to continue to kind of bow out. The crazy thing about SMPR is right now they're only 40 points behind Evil Geniuses in the overall standings. Top 5 is obviously a really big deal, but their winter split did not go all that great. Same thing applies to the team right below them, Team Vitality, but you're talking about a 500-point difference, 470 to be exact, in difference between these two teams in the standings. There's a lot of points that need to be made up by Vitality. So for SMPR, this is a chance to start fresh and see if they can make that involvement. Exotic as a player, I do think is very talented. I think there's a lot of talent just in general in Europe that's spread out. And this could be a similar situation like we talked about in our North America video, where a player who's been stuck in the bubble hasn't gotten a chance to get that infrastructure and that support behind them, and now has this big pop-off potential. I expect, and not even expect, but need players on that team to step up. I think Cassie was underrated. I think Shazette still has a lot of potential, but we just haven't seen the positioning god go sicko mode like he's done at DreamHacks and like Beyond the Summits of the past, where he 1v3 teams like NRG. That is the type of performance I think you need from one of the players, and maybe that's going to be Exotic. I don't know. Overall, though, I do think it is a downgrade from Archie, but I do also agree that something with SMPR had to change. What it's going to lead to, I don't know. But again, another team that I think still in the conversation. So they have an uphill battle, as their 3 former results are not all that appealing when it comes to how they performed. Still super consistent, though. So with double elimination, all it takes is an upset. And with a new team with new tendencies and new play style, could be an exciting one to pay attention to. Possible dark horse. We'll have to wait and see. Number 7, Team Vitality, a team that we spent all winter split changing our mentality and our preconceived notion of its Vitality. Of course, they're really good. That had a really, really tough split. Is now back with Redocin, former Williams Resolve, and so far we have seen them in one tournament, and it looked pretty solid. They did get a top 4 finish in a single elimination tournament, and a lot to build off of. A lot of people very excited about this roster and what it showed, and based upon the replay analysis I did on this team, there is a lot of potential. A bit more urgency to the ball, but also a little bit more poise, I would say. It's weird to see Fairy Peak sit on the bench, but sometimes change is required to see improvement. Overall, I think this one could be a C+, B-. I don't know if we're going to see too many teams, I think, that have the ability to make and break the roster. But with Vitality, I do see this team getting a bit better in the standings and a bit more consistent. So with that, I say B-, B+. I'm probably going to give it a B overall. As much as I love Fairy Peak, something had to give on that Vitality roster, and unfortunately it's him, because I do have a lot of feeling and a lot of compassion towards Fairy Peak and his situation, but knowing he's not done yet is pretty exciting. As for the team itself, KDOP and Alpha, we know Alpha is still putting up 1,000 points per game because that's just what he does, and seeing Radosin get a chance to really showcase how good of a talent he is, because I think that Williams Resolve roster was extremely underappreciated. Should be pretty exciting. So Radosin, I'm going to give him a B for the grading. Up next, K Corp, another team that's a lot of potential from the We Play Invitational that happened in the offseason and then just hasn't been met by too much success. K Corp in general, I think, is a very talented team. It's just a matter of some internal stuff going on with Stake, who is no longer with the roster. They're now bringing in a extremely mechanical player in Nolly, former of Guild. So Stake out, Nolly in, and you're adding another mechanical nut on the team. There's a lot of mechanics on this team with Astral, Itachi, and Nolly. What it's going to look like, I have no idea. So far, from what we've seen from reports publicly, seems to be filling into the shoes quite well, and maybe a bit more consistency for what they're looking for. Could be a three-headed monster, as I have seen what Astral can do when he's willing himself to get victories, and now you're pairing that still with Itachi, who also tends to do that as well. I don't know what this team is going to look like. I think Nolly versus Itachi is a bit of improvement, probably like a, I would say like a B- overall. Maybe a B, even B+ on. Actually, yeah, I'll probably go B plus for Nolly. Even though I really like Stake, I think Stake's performance was due to the circumstance he was in and not him as an individual player, which can be said, I think, about a lot of different circumstances. Because I really like Stake. I really stuck my neck out for Stake in the We Play Invitational, and then he proved that wrong, which is always a really good feeling. But when you are not comfortable in your own team, then I can see why diminishing return on that. So I think it was a change that had to happen, and hopefully Nolly ends up finding a good home and things go well. But I'll give it actually a B+. I think this team could do some damage. Up next at number 9, Misfits. Staying the exact same. Cash, you're really good. We know you're really good. You guys got to just find a way to clutch it up. You get so close every single time to being a team that can go to the major, and then you just fall short. I know you guys are there. It's just a mental game at this point. Excited to watch Misfits, as always. Number 10, 0-0 Nation, also staying the exact same. Breezy Hibbs and Flame looking to show upset potential, as always. Could be fun moving forward. At number 11, Luminosity Gaming, which is a team that so many of us are hoping for. Atomic Tox and EXO have so much potential. I know they memed that Ease was going to be starting. Just a meme, not actually happening. Tox is still the starter. But Luminosity is a team that many of us just saw them get dealt a rough hand, which is kind of how it goes. The just win mentality of one of the teams we'll be talking about last is very true here. Even though Dignitas is not clutching up their group and dropping to the lower bracket, those are the matches you have to win in order to take the next step forward. Give yourself an advantage moving forward. The only reason I can say stuff like that is because I watched it happen to V1 continuously over in North America until they finally started also getting upsets over G2, Energy, etc. Luminosity's in that same circumstance. A lot of us look at this roster and say, okay, overall in the standings, you have 720 points. That is only, 250 points behind 7th place. You can jump up a bunch in the rankings if you have one good result. And they have the potential to do it. We've seen them do it numerous times. And seeding-wise, they're actually going to get a little bit of help off their past 3 events. So I do think that Luminosity, because they get the seeding advantage over a couple teams, if they make it out of close qualifiers, will bump up. Even though there's no change, I'm actually pretty excited about Luminosity. I think this could be their split. So should be fun. Luminosity kind of like my dark horse team with a lot of other people that are just waiting for them to break through. Number 12 overall is Williams Resolve, which was my team that I was always really enjoying, but kept falling a little bit short, which is unfortunate. They are also making a change. As we obviously saw, Radosin go to Vitality. That means there's a gap left, and they're taking K Corp's very own Stake over. I think Stake's going to be really happy about this circumstance. I think the team, while it may not be as prolific as some of the stars that were on K Corp, environment-wise, I think he'll be very happy with and should allow him to showcase what we saw at the We Play Invitational. A lot of potential in this team with Prime and Sazin, and I think a lot of fun to be had as well. I think Williams Resolve just got a pretty solid player that I think most people aren't going to pay attention to. Stake may be the difference that allows them to push up, but I do also agree that Radosin was very solid. I would keep this a pretty neutral grade, not because Stake's bad by any means, or I don't think that Williams Resolve has a chance. I'll probably give it a C+ if I had to give it a grading, because I do think that there is potential with the new player to bump up in the standings a little bit, but when it comes to player comparison from Stake and Radosin, I think it's pretty neutral overall. Could be a dark horse. I'm expecting Women's Resolve to also be in those conversations where it's like this win is the difference between top 8 or top 12. And I hope to see them make that top 8 a few more times this time around. At number 13 overall is Guild Esports, a team that did have a little bit of a resurgence towards the tail end, which is good because the 3 most recent results are 190 points and 160 points, which is just shy of like top 4. So Guild's starting to make some waves, trying to get into the top 6 consistently. And with their new addition, pretty interesting to actually say. Guild Esports was primarily CRR, Devo, and Noli/Nolly. And Nolly now going over to a different team, as we mentioned earlier, does open up a position, and it is Dorito that is going to be coming in. I think the Devo CRR connection has been absolutely fantastic lately, and adding in Dorito, I don't know. It felt like, although Nolly's good, I think Dorito's going to give some sort of consistency to the team that I've been looking for, because they, in the last 2 events, looked pretty dang solid, obviously excluding the Winter Split Major. So overall, I think Nolly, probably a better player overall, but I think for the team chemistry and everything else, I think Dorito's a pretty good fit. So this one I'm pretty excited about. I think Guild's probably one of the teams I'm going to be paying attention to the most, especially after how they ended the last season, or last split, I should say. But as for the grading, player to player, I think it is pretty neutral, maybe like a C+, B-, similar to the Stake Redocin situation, even though playstyles are a little bit different between the two. But with the infrastructure and the support and a good, I think Devo CR are going to be a good foundation for Dorito to thrive in. I'm really excited for Guild. Probably overall, standing wise, I expect them to continue to trend upward, but stay similar to where the results were towards the end of the season when it came to the winter split, not the fall split. So Guild staying about the same, probably C+, B-, if I had to guess. Number 14 overall is actually tied. You've got NAVI and Pokemaniacs. We're going to start with NAVI just because they're staying the exact same. Tigre, Louis P, and Virtuoso. No differences there. Trying to win those qualifying matches at the 2-2 mark. They've been so close so many times to make top 16. Second to them and at the same standings overall is Pokemaniacs. This is actually the former Cookser Minions roster. Growly and Rye are staying together and are going to be bringing in a new player. They have decided that Speed, you guys probably know him obviously from Flipside Tactics, then went to Rix.GG last split, who didn't have much success. Now coming in, they tried out 3 different players. I think it was VK Salin, Speed, and someone else. I forget the third. I think it was actually Nolly that they tried out. I forget their third. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Growly, Rye, and Speed are going to be Pokemaniacs. I don't know what that's going to end up being. I think losing Cookser for Speed, that's a really tough comparison to try to make because they're so different in playstyle, even though they're former teammates at 1.2. I don't know. I really don't know how this one's going to play out. Grading wise, I don't know if I can give it like a C, I guess. We'll keep it average. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I don't know if it's good either. I'm left at a question mark for Pokemaniacs, but if Growly and Rye feel good about it after tryouts, hopefully the results show as well. Last but not least, at number 16 is Heroic, the former Flying Dutchman roster with Violent Panda, Yukio, and Oli. Oli now out and bringing in Noasaki, a young kid who is 16 with a lot of potential and a lot of mechanics. Very quick to the ball. Talked to Violent Panda, obviously, in his interviews, saying a lot of tendencies similar to Astral, a lot of potential, and a special player. Felt similar about Oli, but he feels like the chemistry on this team is a little bit better. The big thing that I see on this one is not even the new addition of the roster, but Violent Panda finding better ways to handle tendonitis in both of his thumbs. He and I have a bet on this roster saying that they can make the major, but it is going to be an uphill battle. They will be, if they do qualify, the 16th seed in just about every conversation. So going to need a lot of help and a lot of upsets. Having the just win mentality where if they go up against teams like Team Queso, you gotta win, doesn't matter. We're in this position for a reason, and these are the results we have to beat in order to give ourselves that moving forward. So Heroic, I think overall, Noasaki, I think is a young player, so it's hard to rate. Just haven't really seen him in the 3 scene all that much, but because of that, I am kind of just left at like a C with a potential chance for upswing. For the matches I did watch, he is very quick. Recovery is very solid, so maybe a little bit higher than that. Try not to get swayed too much by Violent Panda's words. So if I had to be optimistic, which I think I am, because I do think we saw a lot of potential with Heroic in the fall split, it's just injury has plagued them quite a bit. I give this roster maybe a B-. I would like to see Heroic consistently in the main event and then possibly take some matches off of people, because it has been quite a while since we've seen them in main event status. So Heroic gonna have to do some uphill battling. Close qualifier team to be paying attention to without a doubt. They got to make it through open qualifiers as well. Couple honorable mentions to talk about if you guys haven't seen the new Netherlands rosters / SA with 3 H's, Oli, Though, and Mike Boy. They did play in IWO together and are now back together, looking pretty dang solid. Oli, former of Heroic, Though, former of Stormtroopers, and Mike Boy, former of Rix.GG. You've got the new Italian roster, which is Dead Monster of Stormtroopers, Cookster97, which was former of Cookster's Minions, and then Devoof of Savage. You also have Pepitos Canyons, which is Demensa, Nachito, and Thamway, and SK Gaming, don't forget, as well, with Econ, Fruity, and Carrion staying the same. So still a bunch of other rosters to be paying attention to over the course. And if you would like to stay up to date on all those rosters, I know we rifled through a bunch of them and the grades all kind of feel the same. It's just tough, man. These teams at the top, there's a couple obviously to pay attention to, like Vitality and stuff, trying to make resurgence, but these top 5s are pretty dang solid. So with that said, usually spring is a little bit more quiet just in the grand scheme of things because it is final changes before the rest of the season. But if you're trying to stay up to date on these, couple things you can do. Number 1, comment down below rosters that you think are going to be the best performing, couple dark horses, any of your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. Curious to always revisit these in the future after we see how things play out. Also, in the description, you can find a link to this roster document that I use. It'll tell you every single roster from start to finish of the season, keeping things up to date, confirmations of what is happening, and that'll get updated as well. I'll also make sure if there's additional teams that come out of nowhere that end up coming through on the close qualifier and performing consistently, I will also put their history in here as well, just so people know who the heck is playing consistently in the RLCS in the main event. But that is going to do it for this video. A whole bunch of coverage to start getting underway as we prepare for the spring split to be back in full session. But that's going to do it for me. If you guys enjoy the content, as always, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.